Howdy folks, welcome to the Scannell Agenda. My name is Stephen J.F. Scannell, and this is my lovely bride, Pamela Scannell.
Thank you. Hi.
And today's date is Monday, March 18th, 2019. This is show number 102, entitled No Way Out. And I'm going to title 101 is that, do you remember we did that interview with Scott Lively?
I sure
Dr.
do.
Scott Lively?
I sure do.
So that's going to be 101 if I can work that out with the people that filmed it.
Yep.
I don't want to do anything without their permission. Okay, No Way Out here. I'm holding this newspaper. And this is the Cape Cod Chronicle. And it's an article, front page article on the Cape Cod Chronicle, volume 54, number 10, and let's see, March 7th, 2019.
Okay.
If you're interested. So I'll read a little bit of this article, and it does give the shoals here. It gives an aerial view of the shoals, and what you're looking at right here is the entrance to the harbor or Pleasant Bay. Now, it's a problem, and no way out means it's getting shoaled in and there's some sand issues. And who better to deal with sand issues than Stephen J.F. Scannell? I've dug a lot of sand, folks. Under houses and down at the beach. It's been a wonderful life digging sand. One of my files is sand dredges and dredging, etc. So I designed this equipment for the use in eelgrass cultivation and for other purposes, but a lot of dredge design that I do is for the eelgrass. And what we need to do here, I think, in Chatham and in other harbors on the Cape, so this is critical right now for Chatham, but also for the other towns on the Cape, is for the county, Barnstable County, to get together with Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and to go in on some eelgrass cultivation equipment. And the first thing you got to do for the eelgrass is to dredge to depth. And then you want the good substrate and soil to put plugs into. Or you may be using my theoretical method of growing sod on land. And I explained this briefly at that John Stanton's movie there about the bay scallops, the last bay scallop, I think it was, that we saw in Wellfleet. So hopefully there'll be follow-ups to that. Maybe the Wellfleet Audubon and, the Wellfleet Fishermen's Association and Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, or the Center for Coastal Studies, and Woods Hole, and get a few people in there and maybe get some entertaining in there as well so that it's not too dry. So I was going to call this show C-SPAN 40 years because the anniversary is tomorrow for their 40-year anniversary. And we are here at the Cape Cod Community Media Center. And I'm looking over there at a poster for Community Media News, and Cape Cod's television newscast. Watch Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. So it's a nice poster. And we're also looking at the other channel for Cape Cod for this facility here, and that is Channel 98. Now, with Channel 98, I think, in my mind, what I see for the possibilities is for some of the towns, the municipalities, to get together with the county and with the state. Maybe start with fisheries so that different boards can be filmed and then collated or cross-referenced. So if one board on Nantucket is talking about codium, and then there's another board on Martha's Vineyard talking about codium, and then maybe Wellfleet's not talking about it, because I heard, and I didn't know this, their codium disappeared somehow. Wow. But anyway, that was on that panel discussion. It could be eelgrass. It could be, what are we going to do to get the septics pumped out, so that our eelgrass doesn't go south and die, and our scallops are going to go south too if we don't, get on a lot of this stuff. So I was surprised to hear that there are some scallops here and there. Nantucket, I don't want to say it's down for the count, because I have said that before and it turned out not to be true. Years ago, they bounced back, and I was really scared that it was going to go down and go under, because all these fisheries on the East Coast have collapsed. You look at Westport, Bass River. I should be able to rattle off a lot more than that, but these, and there's ports in Rhode Island and Connecticut, and especially New York, that have collapsed with their bay scallop fishery. So, I mean, if we have to talk about hatcheries, let's get some people from China on board. Let's get ARC on board. And, if we're talking about aquaculture in the different towns, let's try to get on the same page if possible. We can get on the same page using these C-SPAN technologies and community media center technologies that interface with Woods Hole, UMass, University of Rhode Island, all these students that are pushing out all these universities that are pushing out all these raring to go kids, adults that are ready to work in the floating marine laboratories. So this can pave the way for the rebuilding of the scallop fishery, as I call it. And as I've mentioned, that would be done in 4 different disciplines. Fishery management, that's management and regulatory, and then water quality, that has to do with the septic systems and,
And that lady said you have to keep saying this over and over.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not really clicking, but
That's true. And then habitat, and of course all these overlap, and then aquaculture. So it's management and regulatory, water quality, habitat, aquaculture. Did I invent that? No. You know who did? The guy that masterminded the rebuilding of the striped bass. And that's how he had it laid out. And he says, you better not try to be leaning on one more than the other. You got to do all 4. It's like a 4-cylindered engine, It's got to be sparking on all 4 cylinders, or 8 cylinders, as they say, okay? And so it came as an epiphany that the shoaling in Chatham could be handled using some extra eelgrass gear, and this would be dredge gear. And this would be something that if we're gonna belly up to the bar, I'm not sure we're gonna do it. I've always been hoping that we would, and I can be a part of that. We can all be a part of that. If we can all belly up and say, we are going to rebuild the bay scallop fishery coastwise, and it goes from Virginia all the way up to Cape Cod. And as I mentioned to somebody, there was a species north of Cape Cod. It's extinct, I believe. And so, anyway, we can do this. If China can sell us their cultivated scallops, and these are bay scallops that this guy Mike Picandra on Martha's Vineyard got the seed stock and sent it to China, and this was all by treaty, seed stock travels around. Then we can work you know, with aquaculture is not that difficult, but you got to get the recipes right. Now, Milford Labs in Connecticut, that's a National Marine Fisheries Service. I don't know if they're still as good as they are, but they used to be pretty darn good, you know, and they can help pull something like this together. So that's federal, that's big. And then State Division of Marine Fisheries here in Massachusetts. We need to rattle their cage and jumpstart them, all these state and federal people, and they will answer the call. They really want us to start having a heartbeat for this kind of thing, and you know, and they'll fall into line and into place. They will just be as ready as the day is long to get this job done. And as I've said before, a lot of fisheries are going to fall into line. Once we get this bay scallop fishery underway, a lot of other fisheries are going to fall in line. There's a nice new little upweller unit, I guess, down on Herring River. I don't think you've seen that little clip on Facebook that I put up there yesterday. But they did a nice job rebuilding the old Wixon, or it's next to the old Wixon shack down there on Herring River. And they said the growth is phenomenal. The algae is just wonderful for growing shellfish. They were surprised, I guess. So they have quahogs, they have sea clams, they have oysters, and maybe something else. I'm sure they can do bay scallops. And that can be, you know, you need a crew for a big floating marine lab, and that can help to start off the floating marine lab. Now for the eelgrass, I had it engineered in my mind that Harwich, Dennis, and Yarmouth would pilot that out and go with this new system that I have devised on the clipboard on paper, where you have sod. Let's say you have a pallet-sized 5-by-side tray of sod, and you have that in a greenhouse, and you're feeding that your neighborhood waste products of urine, mostly, and gray water, or gray pea, I call it, and then maybe some black water. When the sod grows and it's ready, we will then put it in the ocean for a day or two and then plug it with eelgrass, or just plug it with eelgrass if that works. I'm not sure that'll work, how that'll work. But the eelgrass will then dive into this sod, this land-sized sod. One fisherman said, you know, the lawn. Yes, that's what I mean. You could dig up your lawn and do the same thing, plug the eelgrass into that. But I was thinking of the killing two birds with one stone. You take care of getting a few houses off the grid, and then a few more and a few more in Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth, and that way we won't have to do miles and miles of seweraging, which on Nantucket cost them millions and millions and millions of dollars to do Shimo, I think, or what is it, Monomoy area over there on Nantucket Harbor. Boy, this is a complex project, you know, this shoaling, but I think the eelgrass is the ticket. Just some equipment and some men. It can be fishermen. It can be fishermen working for the county or for the state or for a university, you know. We could structure it in any number of different ways. But we have to be on the same page, and that's why I was going to go with this C-SPAN 40-year anniversary. So these TV shows can be collated or cross-referenced. So if we're talking here in Dennis about eelgrass, and Dennis has a lot of ground for eelgrass and scallops, you know. So if we're talking about it here and they're talking about it over there, well, we're going to avail ourselves of, you know, what the other guys are doing, and then on a regular basis get together, like maybe every 2 weeks on a different part of the Cape and Islands. You know, every twice a month, let's say, first week and then third week or something like that. It'd be like the International Institute of Fisheries, Economics, and Trade. Well, that's a big organization that I presented to. And I had my published paper there in the year 2000, and that was Market Quota System, the Ultimate in Public Resource Management. And that's what I would like to see for the economic base of these fishery rebuilds is, yes, we're going to tax a bushel of scallops by $20, let's say, or $25. And then that money goes back into the eelgrass, and we'll hire the fishermen to do that, if that's okay. So that's one way of doing it. I think that's agricultural economics. But if we can get on the same page and say to the federal government, state government, county government, and all the town governments, this is the structure financially and legally of how we're going to do it that makes the most sense. We're going to tax the seafood as it comes ashore, and that's the way it has to be if we're going to move ahead, I think. So I put up on YouTube, I put up on my Facebook page, it's Stephen J.F. Scannell. I'm on Facebook. So please friend me if you're interested in getting on board with this, you know, and we can all do it. It's not a liberal thing or a conservative thing. I'm a little right of center, and I tick people off because I'm a little right of center. On some issues, maybe far to the right. On some issues, maybe far to the left, you know, because I do believe in things like reparations, and a lot of these projects can be given to some of our communities that would appreciate a little bit of hand up with some jobs for their youth, you know, in Ohio, let's say, I picked Ohio for some shipbuilding of what I call the Tabor class, Tabor boy, something about twice as big. That would be a tall ships project. And if you're going to do these projects anyway, and you know they might make sense anyway, you can say, okay, reparations, here you go. It's nothing much, it's a little something, but at least it's a way to honor people that we should. No better way to put it. Honor the people you should.
Give honor where honor is due.
Yeah, give honor where honor is due. So that's why I believe in reparations. I think if you overthink it and you try to turn it into some huge government program, it's not going to work. But if you do a little here and a little there, it'll work. My dad was in the minstrel, I mentioned that. I never told you that, did I?
No.
Al Jolson used to do these minstrel shows. My dad was into that. And then it stopped abruptly, and Dad said to me something like, well, he didn't think it was so bad, you know. He was from the city. My mom was from the city, but they never raised me with any racism at all. They never did, not one speck. And that was pretty good for people of that era, you know, my mom was born in 1920, Dad was born in 23. And these are World War II people. Pretty good people, but not perfect, right?
No one's perfect.
No one's perfect. So, Jesus hated the lawyers, the rich, and the preachy types like the Pharisees. I'm just joking around. But if you look at the Bible, you disagree, because you're making a face. I know, you've disagreed with me on this. Jesus had a few things.
I never read about lawyers, I don't think.
Yeah, he had a few
The
comments,
Pharisees,
you know,
yes.
something like, you know, you've already been paid, your reward, you have it. Anyway, something to that effect. But he was a little snippy about that, Jesus was. Why that comes up, I don't know, I had it written down. I was talking about Facebook, and I put something up there also. This doesn't relate, but it's in regards to that female genital mutilation. And I think, and I would ask the doctors on Cape Cod and the nurses to hold a meeting or 2 or 3 on Cape Cod and the islands so that we can understand this worldwide phenomenon. Maybe make sure it's not taking place here in this country, because we wouldn't allow that. That would be against the law. I think it's a Muslim thing, pretty much.
I think it is too.
But I can't say for sure because I'm not a student of this, but I've known about it for many years, and it horrifies me. So anyway, I put this show number 4, How to Rebuild the Bay Scallop Fishery. That was my 4th show, and we're up to show number 102 now. So I want to go back and say, okay, what's wrong with this show, number 4? And I mean, I had a lot to say about how to rebuild the base columns. These are the base columns, right? And they're beautiful. And just look at that. Look at that, honey. Look at that.
It is. It's beautiful.
You know, you'll never see anything prettier. You know, hold another one up there. Yep, you'll never see anything prettier than these, except maybe for a beautiful bird or a flower. I don't know. What am I, a judge on beauty? This and this. These might have been from our hatchery. See the similarity in the pattern? Look at that similarity. You know? Anyway, I was talking with this lady years ago down at Milford Labs, and she was there. She worked for some Rutgers or something, I'm not sure where she worked, some university. And we were talking about the genetic makeup of the base scallops, and I was trying to lecture my crew, they weren't my crew, but the crew of the Nantucket Marine Laboratory, on the advantages of a broad stalk rather than trying to narrow down the stalk so that you could count it. I didn't go along with that, and I said so a number of times. I thought that was wrong. You got to have a broad stalk. So on one of the other shows, I was also mentioning, hey, we better get this job done, rebuilding these base scallops here. We better get it done, simply because we're going to run out of the good broad genetic stock. Now, right now, Provincetown has a few scallops, and Wellfleet, maybe Truro has a few, and Nantucket definitely has more than a few, Martha's Vineyard, et cetera, et cetera. I think Harwich is wiped out, and Chatham might have a few now, too. So that's good, but I think we should, you know, plan on 10 times by a factor of 10 each year. Just outproduce the year before using aquaculture. Mainly using something Rick Carney could set up for us. He's with the Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Group. He's a lot of fun. He's retired. But he has the Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Group. He works with them. He's retired again. But he knows all about how to set up remote set aquaculture. And that's cheap. You don't need a huge hatchery to do that. So that's the way to go on that, 5 minutes. Now, what am I missing on here? Oh yeah, we talked about septic pump outs at this little showing of the base scallop, the last base scallop in Wellfleet. And for the life of me, why the hell we don't, get on this? It's about the simplest thing we could do is start pumping septics twice a year, let's say. And then, you know, for my work, a lot of my design work now is using salt water as a cleanser to come in shore and then pump it back out, all inoculated and full of the nutrients, and send it offshore, not as a waste product, but as a fully inoculated and living algae, plankton, etc. And I figure you can put light and salt water underground into a existing old septic system, and that's the right place for this stuff too, because you want it cold. The light, don't worry about that, we can introduce the light. But you want the constant seawater temperature, you bring the seawater in, and then you use the waste products, number 1, number 2, as nutrients, and then you're cycling in and out in probably 3 or 4 different tanks. You're inoculated, that means taking the algae and using your number 1 and number 2 waste products as fertilizer for the algae, and then you send it back out. But it's saltwater systems, which I've never heard anyone else talk about, but it's possible. There are many ways to do using the number 1 and number 2 waste products so that we don't end up ruining our fishery. So sewering the Cape and Islands, somebody said that's a multi-billion-dollar project over the years. So if there's a better way, we want to find that out now. But we can parse out all these issues as we get into the base scallop, as I call it, revival. You know, churches can do suppers, and they can do Christian revival, along with the base scallop revival. And to that end, we can get some good Christians in on stewardship and some social mixing of, let's say, Christians and environmentalists. Not that you're not an environmentalist if you're a Christian, or, I don't mean to say that, but I think it would be fun to have a working relationship, and that's why I see myself as kind of an isolated pastor, and for this one genre of the Green Jesus box, to get environmentalists, atheists, agnostics, I don't care if you're an environmentalist, in on the stewardship deal. 2 minutes. I was going to get into the codapology and the DNA thing, but I'm not going to. And I solved the energy crisis. I don't think we have time to get into that. What was that, 2 minutes?
2 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. So I had the fisheries stuff figured out before they put me in Taunton, these rich people that wanted to give away their little gifts to the left wing, I guess it was. I'm getting things figured out after all these years about what happened on Nantucket when we lost our salt ponds. Fishing rights money, habitat is worth more money. Fishing rights may be worth a few bucks to the fishermen, but the habitat's worth a lot more to all of us. It's a public resource value. Yep. So, maybe I'll run for president on all these little items I have here. I can be one of the also-rans, and we can do fundraising and focus groups. Because if you've got an agenda and you're running for president, you're the oddball. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of these people running, they have a little bit of an agenda, but nothing like mine. And I'll bring Donald Trump closer to my agenda. I guarantee you that, if I can. And he's family, right? We want the best for him. Okay, well, that's the Scannell agenda. Thanks very much for watching.
Thank you.